Brian Myers knew he was in trouble when he fell to the floor. He had no feeling on his left side and couldn't stand in the crawl space between his bed and the wall. It was really frightening. I couldn't get up and I didn't realize at that moment I'd had a stroke, he said. My cell phone was on the dresser about 15 feet away, but there was no way I could get to it. Seconds later, Myers, 59, felt something wet and rough on his face, his dog's tongue. Sadie, the 100-pound German Shepherd he had rescued from an animal shelter near his Teaneck, New Jersey home last fall, was standing above him with a look of concern on her face, he said. She kept licking me and crying, so I reached my right hand up to pet her. Then I grabbed her collar, recalled Myers, who had gone to bed just 2 hours before he fell that evening of January 16th. He was stunned by what happened next, he said. Sadie backed up and began pulling Myers inch by inch out of the crawl space and then wiggled toward his dresser. She was not trained as a service dog, but she was in distress over what was happening, and she could tell that I was in trouble, he said. I don't know how she did it, but she knew. 5 minutes later, he was in front of his dresser and was able to reach up about 3 feet with his right arm and retrieve his cell phone to call for help, Myers said. At Inglewood Health Hospital that night, Myers was given an MRI that revealed he'd suffered a stroke. Doctors told him it was likely that his four-legged companion had saved his life. Also, if you've not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these animal stories every day. Now, back to the story. It was the best decision I'd ever made to adopt her, said Myers, who came home last month and has much of his mobility back thanks to physical therapy. I really feel it was meant to be. Another serious illness led him to adopt Sadie, a dog that nobody else seemed to want, at the Rampo Bergen Animal Refuge in Oakland, New Jersey last September. Myers is retired and lives alone. He felt lonesome and scared after he came down with COVID-19 early on during the pandemic last March, he said. I decided it would be a good idea to get a dog after all that time I'd sat in my house by myself, Myers said. I'd had a rescue dog before, but I had to put him down a couple years ago. I was ready for another one. About 6 months after he'd recovered from coronavirus, a friend who is familiar with the Rampo Bergen Animal Refuge emailed him a photo of Sadie, and he was immediately intrigued, Myers said. Sadie had been identified by the shelter as hard to place because of her aggressive behavior. Myers made an appointment to visit the dog, and on the appointment day, Sadie was brought outside to the sanctuary's play area. The refuge often accepts dogs such as Sadie that are rejected by other shelters because they can't get adopted due to behavior issues, said Megan Brinster, Rampo Bergen's executive director. Staff workers and volunteers train the animals in hope that bad behaviors can be eliminated and make them more adoptable, she said. Sadie exhibited aggression toward men, Brinster said, and visitors to the animal refuge were often intimidated by her large size and loud bark. The 6-year-old German Shepherd wasn't a good fit for most homes, and she'd been sent away by 3 animal shelters because of her behavior before she ended up at the no-kill sanctuary last June, she added. She's very protective and anxious in a kennel situation, Brinster said. When she doesn't want someone in her space, she'll make herself look big and start barking. But after Brian put in his application, we thought, let's give them a chance. Within minutes of meeting, Sadie and Myers were playing fetch with a ball, and he was able to take her out for a walk, Brinster said. It was an inspiring thing to watch. They were this amazing match, she said. It was clear they were ready to go. When I first saw Sadie, I thought, wow, that's one big dog, Myers recalled. I believe that her size was one of the reasons they had a problem placing her. When the adoption papers were finalized, he'd loaded her into the back seat of his car and drove directly to a pet store to buy a big bag of dog food, some chew bones and a squeaky toy and a dog bed. I kept looking in the rearview mirror and saying, wow, what a big girl, he said. Shortly after Myers let Sadie inside the house, she stood on her hind legs, put her paws on his shoulders, and licked his face, he said. I knew that I wanted to make the rest of her years happy ones, he said. On their first night together, Myers discovered that Sadie's idea of happiness involved ditching the new dog bed and taking over his own. She'd started out on the pillow next to mine, then ended up sleeping at the foot of the bed, he said. It became her routine. I thought, after all she's been through, who am I to deny her the pleasure of sleeping in a bed? In December, when Myers came down with COVID-19 a second time, doctors told him that he'd been exposed to a new variant. He said Sadie stayed by his side in bed until he felt better. Young readers are struggling in the pandemic. Here's how horses are helping. Weeks later, he stood up in the night to walk to the restroom and his legs buckled. Meyer's doctor told him later that his stroke was brought on by blood clots due to COVID-19, he said. When he was released from rehab center on February 9th, his brother brought Sadie for a reunion in the parking lot. He'd been watching Sadie while I was gone, and I had to keep reminding him, "She's my dog. She's going home with me," Meyer said. In the parking lot that day, he said he wept as Sadie jumped into his lap and smothered him with sloppy kisses. "She knocked my glasses off and kept licking my face," he said. "All I could do was just hug her close and say, 'I love you.'" If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with your friends and family. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.